Welcome back to the Tundra, episode 14, presented by Nicolet Law. He's John Kuhn, Packers legend. I'm Matt Schneidman of The Athletic. Before we get started, quick friendly reminder around this holiday season. Give us the gift of your subscription to our YouTube channel, the Tundra GB. Subscribe, follow, like, whatever you want to do on all socials, podcast platforms, YouTube, at the Tundra GB on IG and X would really help us out. We appreciate everybody for listening to our episodes every week as we get this show on the road. All right, John, I know it's a couple days removed from the Packers' 31-24 win over the Lions as we sit here around noon on Monday, December 1st. Hope you and all our listeners had a happy Thanksgiving weekend. But let's dive into a couple things from the game before we turn the page to a massive game against the Chicago Bears. Number one, where's Matt LaFleur and what did whoever took him do with him? Because 3 times he goes for it on fourth down. Not the wildest decisions, but that was a different Matt LaFleur than maybe we've seen. And I know he didn't really acknowledge the fact and kind of, dismiss the notion that he made a statement against Dan Campbell and the Lions. But man, the way he coached that game, I got to give him his flowers. And maybe Ed Policy, as he's walking out of that building, feels a little bit differently about those dollar signs on a new contract, perhaps.
Well, I think when you put everything in perspective here of chasing that team that is the Detroit Lions in the division for the last several years, that if you want to be the best, if you want to win this division, you got to take down the team that was the reigning champs. And how do you take them down? You got to take them down by playing their game. You got to be physical. The Packers check that box. You got to take chances. The Packers check that box. And then you got to perform on the field. And Matt LaFleur making the calls is one thing. It's the guys going out there and executing. And each one of those fourth downs were so delicate and so close to being a great play or a terrible play. And Matt LaFleur knew the margin for error was razor thin. But credit Jordan Love, credit Dontayvion Wicks for both of his catches on fourth downs. Those were the difference in the game. In a game that was separated by 2 minutes in time of possession, 0-0 on the turnover differential, and yards were separated the exact same amount of plays these offenses had. It was a very close, very tight-knit game separated by one thing and one thing only, and that's the fourth down conversions. Packers got 3 of them, Lions missed 2 of them, and that was the difference in the ballgame.
I think it carried a little bit more significance how Matt LaFleur coached that game, how the Packers executed because of who it came against. Dan Campbell's kind of revolutionized, for lack of a better word, how teams approach going for it on fourth down, or at least how maybe we view going for it on fourth down. He sometimes gets a little too much dip on his chip, did a little bit on Thursday as well, but to do that against a guy who in his first 8 games against you, Dan Campbell got to the Lions in 2021. His first 4 seasons, he went 6-2 against the Packers in some crucial spots, kind of starting with that 2022 finale where the Lions had nothing to play for and still beat the Packers, who would have made the playoffs with a win in what ended up being Aaron Rodgers' final game with the team. So whether it's, technically accurate or not, Dan Campbell kind of bullied Matt LaFleur for the first 4 years of this matchup. And not only because of Thursday, but because of what happened in week 1, Matt LaFleur has kind of flipped this script and he goes into Detroit on Thanksgiving, needing a big win, and goes 3 for 3 on fourth down with 2 touchdowns in the game clincher against the guy who kind of made going for it on fourth down cool. That to me is a statement for Matt LaFleur. And I asked him about that after the game. And like I said, he kind of rejected the notion that here the Packers made that statement. He's going to say all the right things at the podium, but I bet his internal monologue was far different than what he said in front of that microphone. Huge statement. If I do say so myself, I don't think there's any 2 bones about it.
I think the biggest part of it is to win each and every game doesn't need to go by the same script. We watched him just a week ago play the Minnesota Vikings at home, run the football, play call very cautiously, game situation, same, kicking field goals to the chagrin of Packer faithful at Lambeau Field. And he had a plan for that game, and that plan was, and he told it to me straight at halftime of the Vikings game, possess the football, don't turn it over, force turnovers on defense, and play stout defense, and we win this football game. Here against the Detroit Lions, it's not that. The Detroit Lions, it's not just possess the football, play great defense, and you win. That Lions team was averaging 33 points per game at home, at Ford Field. You know when you get down there close and you're 3 yards away, 2 yards away, 16 yards away, whatever they were on their fourth down conversions, you need 7. You don't need 3 in a ball game like this. It was the anti-2014 NFC Championship game where we kicked a bunch of field goals, padded a little bit of a lead, but we came up a couple points short in the final result. Matt LaFleur was making sure that was not the case. I thought the first couple fourth downs were very calculated, Matt. To keep them down in their end is one thing. If you don't convert the fourth down, if you don't score a touchdown there, at least the Lions have to go the distance of the field to get points themselves. But that last one to seal the game, that is the one that really took the game plan and told me this was more than just Matt LaFleur deciding to go for these in a moment. This was a calculated, I'm going into this game and I'm going for it every chance that I think we have a 50-50 probability or better. And you know why it told me that? Because he threw it on third down and he threw it on fourth down. Matt LaFleur was going for the jugular there when all the chips were on the table at midfield.
Yeah, I think the first two were far more understandable. 4th and 3 from the 22, up 3-0 early in the second. I was more surprised by the play call on that one to go deep to Wicks. And luckily for the Packers, Brian Branch just kind of stopped running. Maybe Wicks still makes the play. But the 4th and 1 from the 2 up 10-7, I thought that was, you need 1 yard. That one, obviously, they're the benefactor of a blown call, giving LaFleur the timeout. And he essentially admitted that the refs messed that up, but they'll take it. And the refs weren't perfect on either side. That was just the one glaring mistake that they made. And the last one, I tweeted before the third down. I said, this is 4 down territory for the Packers, or at least it should be. I didn't know what they were going to do, but something in my gut just said, they got to go. It was more of me saying this is what they should do rather than this is what they will do. So that just shows that I know ball, and they went for it on 4th. I can't even say that without laughing. But I agree with you, and I agree with kind of the line of thought that Matt LaFleur had. It's, you want to put this game away. The Packers defense, on 5 of their prior 6 drives, I believe, had allowed at least 50 net yards. I have the numbers somewhere. I don't want to waste your time looking for them right now, but the Packers had allowed between like 50 and 75 net yards on 5 of their last 6 defensive drives. So I get why Matt LaFleur didn't want to, give the Lions offense another chance with only 55 yards to go to tie the game or take the lead if they go for 2. I think, like you said, you got to go for the jugular. And they did. Jordan Love made a great play. Dontayvion Wicks made a great play. And we're sitting here praising them instead of talking about how Matt LaFleur messed up. And he was asked after the game, this is the last thing I'll say before I give it back to you. He was asked, what if it didn't work out? What if you give the Lions the ball back? And Matt LaFleur said, I'd rather go down swinging.
And that's what told me it was a plan to go into this game and do it. Even if it wasn't, I'd like to know what the feel was up in the press box, because on the field, even, you felt like that game where the Packers had a couple benefits of the refs in the first half, a couple calls go their way that were very close and maybe shouldn't have been that way. You don't always get those bounces. You don't always get those calls, and the Packers got those. And then at halftime, they're only up 3 points. You really felt like you were messing around with a dangerous animal in the Lions here. And then to start the second half and have a 2-score lead and then have that, battle back and forth, touchdown as each team was getting the football. It felt like if the Packers had given the ball back to the Lions one more time, they might be able to go down there, score. And I'm sure Dan Campbell was going to go for 2 had they gotten that opportunity. So I like the mindset because they were going for the victory in a game that felt like it took everything they had and then a couple, beneficial calls to go their way to be in that position. So taking advantage of the opportunity was very big.
To answer your question, yes, that was the plan going in. Jordan Love said after the game that he had talked with LaFleur during the week about kind of the play style they needed to win in Ford Field. And Matt LaFleur said after the game, it's a tough place to play. The best way to go in there and win is to be aggressive. And that's what they did. I want to talk Micah Parsons a little bit. We could talk about him every show, but we have to because he's that good. I don't know how many different ways we can continue talking about him, but I wrote it this morning on The Athletic. He is the Packers version, and I'm going to make a Yankees reference because that's what Jeff Hafley did, of Mariano Rivera. Mariano Rivera, for those who don't know, is the only unanimous election into the Baseball Hall of Fame ever. He's the best relief pitcher ever, the best closer ever. Jeff Hafley grew up 40 minutes from Yankee Stadium, compared Micah Parsons to the Packers version of Mariano Rivera, their closer. Micah leads the NFL in fourth quarter sacks with 7. He is the guy that when you need a sack, need a stop in a 2-minute drill, in a crucial spot in a fourth quarter, he's going to make a play. He did it again against the Lions. They're facing a 3rd and goal from the 4-yard line, trailing by 10 with not much time left. And Micah Parsons rolls around Brinson and Wyatt, and unfortunately, we'll get into this later. Unfortunately for Devontae Wyatt and the Packers, that's the play he got injured on because he was a big reason that play was made. Micah Parsons comes up with a big sack to become the first person in NFL history with at least 12 sacks in each of their first 5 seasons since sacks became a stat in 1982. John, you played in the NFL for a while. Can you please contextualize how a human being is able to keep his tank at full for that long on a week-to-week basis like Micah Parsons is?
It's not Micah Parsons. It's Micah freaking Parsons, Matt. This guy is, I cannot tell you, I've watched a lot of football since 2005. I've been watching the NFL up close with my own eyes, and there are very few. I don't know if I've ever seen a defensive player in a Green Bay Packer uniform have the impact that he has each and every down and each and every week. And think about what you said, the 7 sacks in the fourth quarter, that's the hardest time to get a sack. That is when you are at your lowest on your energy bar. The offense has already made checks and schemes on how to protect even better and adjustments to what you've been showing them throughout the course of the entire game. And those are the big money downs. Those are the big money plays. And Micah Parsons is the one making the play, wreaking the havoc that only the best players can do. I cannot contextualize. You asked me to do that. I cannot put into words what he actually does on the football field, especially on those big time plays, because he's so amazing. I watched him beat the left tackle outside with a swipe move to sack Jared Goff at the beginning of that drive. Then I watched him swipe the left tackle to the inside to pressure Jared Goff on the exact next play. Here's a left tackle who's a pretty darn good left tackle now, has essentially whiffed, and you called him Mariano Rivera, whiffed at his pitches 2 plays in a row in a league where that just doesn't happen. And he doesn't just get home, he gets home like that in an instant. He is fast to win and get his pressures. He's not just a hustle guy. He's not just a finish through the play type of guy. He is very quickly wreaking havoc on these plays. And he is the reason why this defense is where it's at this year as a top 5 defense in the National Football League.
And they're going to need him even more, perhaps rushing from the interior without Devontae Wyatt for what I assume will be the rest of the season. We'll get into that injury and what it means for the Packers a little bit more. Just quickly before we go into the second segment and dive into the Bears, Dontayvion Wicks, that's the best game of his career. Matt LaFleur said after the game, kind of the process to this breakout game and the wait, it was never for a lack of ability. And they've never lost faith in Wicks. You ask his teammates, he's the best route runner on the team. You watch him, he looks like Davante Adams running routes. I'm not saying he is Davante Adams. He's got a long way to go. But he looks like Davante Adams in just the way he moves. And last year, Dontayvion Wicks has 8 drops, 39 catches, 8 drops. That's terrible. His hands were bad last year. He had stickum on those gloves on Thursday. Just the way he's evolved from a liability catching passes to a guy that can go up and win a contested jump ball, not just for a touchdown in a big moment, but then to seal a game of that magnitude, you got to give the guy props. And I love the post-game game ball awardings, if you will, that Matt LaFleur gives out and how the Packers film them and tweet it out every week. especially this week. Micah Parsons gets one, team goes nuts. Jordan Love gets one, team goes nuts. Watch the reaction when Dontayvion Wicks gets one. Go back and watch that video and watch the reaction when Dontayvion Wicks gets that game ball. You can tell maybe kind of what he's been through, not only performance-wise, but injury-wise. He's been dealing with a calf injury essentially ever since training camp. And to grit it out and put in that type of performance, that doesn't go unnoticed by people outside and inside the building.
Yeah, and when you talk about some of his drops that we've seen in the past, a lot of those are easy catches, right? Mm-hmm. They're the easy ones where he's standing still, he's waiting to catch the ball, he's at the top of his route, and it's like a little hitch and catch the ball and then run. He seems to thrive on the harder the catch, the less thinking is involved, the more concentration is involved, and he goes up and makes the big play. And that's what he did in this football game. And I think I've always had great faith in Dontayvion Wicks to be able to run the routes, to be able to catch the football since I've seen him as a rookie here for the Packers. And it just might be the natural maturation process of him as a wide receiver to be able to take the next step now. And don't look, Christian Watson is ascending as we were hitting December football. Dontayvion Wicks appears to be ascending as we are hitting December football. Jordan Love, we know, is Toyotathon ascending as we hit December football. And Jaden Reed, when he comes back, the lift he could bring to this offense. So when we talk about complementary football, and you saw a lot of that in this game against the Lions, the defense being dominant, maybe the offense can take a step from being really good to being consistent, and that will make them dominant as well to kind of complement that defense.
I'm glad you said that, John, because in my notes here for our second segment, I have a bullet point about Jaden Reed. We expect him to come back Sunday against the Bears. We're going to dive into that and much more surrounding the tight NFC playoff landscape right after this. You're listening to The Tundra.
This episode of the Tundra podcast is brought to you by Nicolet Law. Now, you don't have to look far online to find insurance horror stories. Heck, they are everywhere. Insurance companies, they have a playbook designed to reduce the value of injury claims, if not deny them altogether. Every day, Wisconsinites, they should not be expected to know that playbook, but they still have to face it. They have to play against it. Nicolet Law, they excel in representing personal injury cases because they understand how insurance companies operate, and they know that playbook inside and out. If you've been injured, Nicolet Law is ready to help level the playing field. Call 1-855-NICOLET or visit nicoletlaw.com.
Welcome back to the Tundra, episode 14, presented by Nicolet Law. John, this NFC playoff race is going to be a sight to behold entering the home stretch. Every single team in the NFC playoff field is either 7-5, 9-3, 8-4, and then there's the Packers who are 8-3-1. Here's a better way to illustrate kind of how tight this playoff race is. The Bears are 9-3 at the number 1 seed. The 49ers are 9-4 at the 7 seed. There's very little margin for error, and the Packers got a little bit of breathing room with that win over the Lions. A loss would have knocked them out of the playoff field entirely entering week 14 here. But what do you think of the Packers' prospects kind of going into this home stretch with 2 games against the Bears in 3 weeks, game against the Ravens, game against the 10-2 Broncos, and then one more against the Vikings?
Well, I think first and foremost, like we said last week, the winner of that football game against the Lions is our favorite to win the North. The Packers are my favorite to win the North now, and there's nothing that tells me that they're not going to finish the job here and beat the Bears and beat the Vikings the last week of the regular season game and finish with a really good divisional record this year, if not 6-0 in the division. I like the Packers' chances a lot, so to speak. I really do. And I got my sights set higher. I got my set on the 1 seed, which means you're going to have to take take care of your business each and every week here. And it doesn't get easy for the Packers. It doesn't get easy for the Bears. It doesn't get easy for the Lions. You look at all these schedules that people are playing and across conference games and across division games that you have here. It gets very tough. I mean, it's going to be tough for the Bears, who are sitting at the 1 seed right now, to finish the job and make the playoffs. It's going to be tough for them to just make the playoffs with the way that their schedule is shaping up. And obviously, they got to go out here and try and beat the Packers this week. Then they got the Browns, and they got the Packers again. I mean, this thing is so muddled right now. We're going to have a much clearer picture next week. And the one game I want you to keep an eye on, Matt, is what's going to happen on Thursday when the Cowboys play the Lions. Cowboys are either going to play themselves right back into playoff contention and be one of those teams nipping on everybody's heels with that dangerous offense and that reworked defense, or the Lions are going to stay, okay, we're still here. You guys got to deal with us in the playoffs, and they're going to stay in the playoff hunt. But one of those two teams is going to be right on the heels of the playoffs again, and then one of those two teams is going to be looking at a really tough hill for them to climb.
Yeah, I don't want to call it an elimination game because it's not technically, but
pretty close
between the Lions and the Cowboys on Thursday night. So the Bears are 9-3, Broncos are 10-2. Three of the Packers' last 5 games are against the current number 1 seeds in each conference. Their next 3 games are against the current number 1 seeds in each conference. Packers go home against the Bears, at Denver, at Chicago the next 3 weeks. I think this stretch will tell us, are the Packers legitimate Super Bowl contenders, or are they just a playoff team that might have to get hot if they make the dance?
Well, that's the best part about this stretch, Matt. That's the best part about this stretch is we just started our divisional games. We talked about how tough these last 7 games would be with 5 of them being in division. Well, the cross-conference games, the Denver Broncos are 10-2, and the Ravens are fighting for their lives and a playoff berth themselves. So they're going to get tough, good teams down the stretch that all have something to play for until you hit Minnesota. But right, this stretch right here of games and teams that you have to play all the way through Christmas will mean that the Packers are going to have to play, not just get into the playoffs, the Packers are going to have to play good football in order to get to the playoffs. And that bodes well for when you do get to the playoffs versus not having that competition in the last month of the season.
I'd like to correct myself. The Broncos are currently the 2 seed. They have the same record as the Patriots at 10-2, since the Patriots have not had their bye yet. So I was just assuming they were 9-2 because they play tonight, Monday Night Football against the Giants. We'll know if they had won or lost that game by the time you're listening to this. But the point is, the 3 of the Packers' next games are against teams that are 10-2 and 9-3. This game against the Bears is for first place in the NFC North. The Packers at 8-3-1. If they win, get to 9-3-1, send the Bears to 9-4. Then they're in first place, they already control their destiny for first place in the NFC North. And you mentioned the number 1 seed. The Packers aren't guaranteed the number 1 seed after week 14, even if they beat the current number 1 seed, because the Rams play the Cardinals, and the Rams are currently 9-3. So let's say the Packers win, get to 9-3-1. Then the Rams, if they win, they're 10-3. And they're probably going to win against the Cardinals. And then they would be the number 1 seed, even if the Packers win. The Seahawks are also 9-3. The Rams have the head-to-head over the Seahawks, which is why they're currently ahead in the standings. But the Seahawks next week play the Atlanta Falcons. That's probably a win for them. So you could have 2 10-3 teams. You're probably looking at a 2 seed for the Packers entering week 15 if they knock off the Bears. But nonetheless, a massive game in the tight NFC playoff race. I want to touch on a couple personnel things for the Packers, John. Jayden Reed, would you say he's the Packers' best receiver when everyone's healthy?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say he's
never mind then.
Right there with Christian Watson. I'd say he's right there with Matthew Golden. He's right there, and Matthew Golden doesn't have the stats. I understand. I'm just talking about from what they can do on the football field. I think we have a lot of receivers that are capable of some big time things. So no, I wouldn't say he's their best receiver hands down.
My point is, you can make the argument. I should have said arguably.
You can make that argument.
And especially like we've talked about in past weeks, some of the after catch stuff that he's able to do, and the Packers haven't always been great at that after losing.
I do think he's the
Tucker
best
Kraft.
in that category.
Yes,
I do.
Yeah. I say that to say, Jayden Reed, I believe, and this will be the case by the time you're listening to this, will have only had 1 legitimate practice going into Wednesday's practice. He returned the Friday before the Vikings game. got in a limited day of work. And then before the Lions game, they didn't have an actual practice. It was all walkthrough stuff. Then today, Monday, it is 12:39 p.m. right now. We have a Matt LaFleur press conference at 2 and locker room availability at 2:20. No practice viewing. So Jaden Reed's second actual practice will be on Wednesday. And then if he is limited throughout this week, that'll be 4 limiteds before they have to make a decision on whether he can play against the Bears on Sunday. I expect that to happen because it's been a couple weeks since they designated him for a return, or it will be by the time they hit Sunday's game. If they can get him back on Sunday, even in a limited capacity, I think that's huge. Not only for Sunday, but for what it means as he gets ramped up down the home stretch and into the playoffs here. Like we said, great after the catch. Can maybe even help on returns, although I find it hard to believe they would put him back there. And really, just another underneath weapon. If you're sending Golden and Watson deep, it's another guy that can create underneath instead of having to rely, with all due respect, on guys like Luke Musgrave and Josh Jacobs on checkdowns all the time.
Yeah, he would be a huge boost to this Packers offense, especially the little dynamic stuff that he can do with the ball in his hands after the catch. And I see a lot of ways that he could help this football team. And I see a lot of ways that Matt LaFleur would love to use him. He's a big play guy, and he started the season off this year making a couple big plays, and that's why it hurt the offense so badly when he did go down. To have the different weapons in the different places that the Packers did have during the training camp, during the preseason, to lose that so quickly when he went down in that Washington game was a big thing that they had to overcome throughout the course of the year. But getting him back can be equally as big a boost in the opposite direction and really send them into a trajectory that has people really scared of this Packers offense as we go forward.
On the flip side, someone they lost, not someone they're getting back, but Devontae Wyatt. He's their best interior defensive lineman. You could tell based on how Matt LaFleur talked about that injury after Thursday's game that it's probably a season ender. I know Rappaport reported it's a fractured ankle. Matt LaFleur said he's sick for Devontae Wyatt. In Matt LaFleur translation, that means he's done. Now, like I said earlier, it was sad for him because he basically made the play happen on the play he got hurt on. Warren Brinson, if my memory stands after rewatching the game, Warren Brinson just accidentally rolled up on the back of Devontae Wyatt's leg and basically snapped his ankle. And Devontae Wyatt was one of the ones who generated that pressure, collapsed the pocket to allow Micah Parsons to come around for that fourth quarter sack. They lost Devontae Wyatt for a couple games earlier this season. His pass rush ability, the way he clogs up the middle of that defensive line, nobody else really does it like him. And Micah Parsons spoke after the game. You could tell his mood shifted from talking about the win and how he played and all that and being thankful to when he was asked about Devontae Wyatt, it's like he saw a ghost. And he finished his answer about Devontae Wyatt and what he means to the team by saying, I hope he gets everything he deserves this offseason. AKA, I hope he still gets that contract extension he's looking for going into that fifth-year option year next year. John, I asked you to contextualize kind of how Micah Parsons does what he does. Contextualize how big this loss is for the Packers. I know Devontae Wyatt may not be a household name across the league, but what he can do for this Packers team is massive.
I'll do that by quoting Micah Parsons when earlier in the season he was asked what happened to the defense that started the season off so great and then halfway through the Cowboys game looked like they couldn't stop a nosebleed. And Micah Parsons said simply, it correlated directly with the loss of Devontae Wyatt in that game and the time that he missed earlier in the football season. You could see how we're not as stout in the middle. We don't generate pressure in the middle as often as we do with Devontae Wyatt, and it's harder to stop the run without Devontae Wyatt in the middle of that defense. He's third on the football team in sacks. He's third on the football team in quarterback hits at an interior defensive lineman position. He's third on the team in tackles for losses. So he is some big shoes to fill, and it's going to have to be done similarly like the offense has with Tucker Kraft. It's going to be a little bit here, a little bit there. It's going to have to be everybody on that defense. And Micah Parsons is going to have to continue to raise his level, and Rashawn Gary's going to have to raise his level. Lucas Van Ness Ness, and those are the guys that don't even play the exact same position. That's going to be a Warren Brinson, a Stackhouse, a Carl Brooks. When he gets back, it's going to be all hands on deck to try and replace a very important part of the middle of the Packers defense.
You mentioned a bunch of guys there. I'm looking at one guy to pick it up, and that's Warren Brinson. Colby Wooden's done some nice things this year. He'll stay as a prominent figure of this defense. Van Ness, I don't know what's going on with his foot. He played a couple snaps against the Vikings and then was back out for the Thanksgiving game. He clearly couldn't go. We'll see if he's back at practice this week. I'm looking at Warren Brinson to really step up his game and not fill Devontae Wyatt's shoes, but be that guy who they drafted this year. Stackhouse started the year on the active game day roster over Brinson, who was a healthy scratch for a bunch of games. Brinson played really well against the Vikings. Like I said, he had that great push on the last Micah Parsons sack against the Lions. This is a guy who we saw flash that pass rushing ability in camp. I thought Stackhouse was the better run defender. I thought Brinson was the better pass rusher. Devontae Wyatt, would you agree that he's probably a better pass rusher than he is a run defender, even though he can do both? I would say you look at Warren Brinson to replace him, at least in part, as a pass rusher. But nonetheless, you lose Tucker Kraft, you lose Elton Jenkins, you lose Devontae Wyatt. Zach Tom's still their best offensive lineman, but you could make the argument at least that you lose your top guy at 3 different positions for the season. Yet here the Packers are still at 8-3-1 with everything ahead of them.
You know, it's the next man up mentality. And the one thing that really bodes well for Goody and this Packers football team down the stretches, I felt like at the beginning of the season, they had great depth from 1 to 53 on the active roster. And I still feel that way now when you compare them to other teams around the league. Everybody's dealing with injuries, but the Packers seem to have better depth to be able to put players in. And not that it's a 1-for-1 trade-off, but that it's less of a blow than what would be as expected at some of these positions. And we'll have to watch and see how the loss of Devontae Wyatt in the replacement, and I agree with you, mostly by Warren Brinson, but mostly by company, is going to be a big tell here on how far the Packers can go in the playoffs.
Yeah, and like you said, before we dive into some Bears preview here in the next segment, it's going to be a collective effort. And that interior is important because, as we saw on that last sack, it opens things up for Micah Parsons, who might be a guy they look to generate some of that interior pass rush without Devontae Wyatt. We've seen him rush from the interior with great success, like on that last play.
He's successful everywhere he lines up.
Everywhere.
That's why you cannot contextualize the man.
That play against the Vikings where he bowls over Brian Kelly from the interior, his last sack against the Lions from the interior. So maybe they just moved Micah Parsons to defensive tackle. All right, it's time. After you get your bathroom break, after you get a cup of water, we're going to contextualize how big this Packers-Bears matchup is. Dive into that and much more after the break. You're listening to The Tundra. Welcome back to The Tundra, episode 14. This segment is brought to you by the fine folks at Potawatomi Sportsbook. Hey, sports bettors, whether you're new to the game or can knock out 16-leg parlays with the best of them, the premier sportsbook you want is smack dab in the heart of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Not only are there over 90 sports betting kiosks, there's all-star dining, first-class drinks, a giant video wall, and more. It's nothing short of awesome. Potawatomi Sportsbook, bet above the rest. John's got some good food there. Go check it out. I've been down there for a couple different business ventures. It's the closest thing you're going to get in the Midwest to a Las Vegas-style casino. The sportsbook is awesome. The TVs are awesome. And right now at Potawatomi Sportsbook, you can get the Green Bay Packers against the Chicago Bears for -6.5 for Sunday's game. We'll get into our score predictions later, but it's time to dive in to the matchup. John, I've given you some time to think about it. When is the last time, you've been part of a lot of these games, that Packers-Bears had this much juice?
I would say probably 2018 when the Bears acquired Khalil Mack right before the start of the regular season. He came into Lambeau Field, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal then, and they took the lead at half, knocked Aaron Rodgers out of the ball game. He came back after halftime, led the Packers back to one of the better come from behind victories of his career as a Green Bay Packer quarterback. That's the last time I remember a Bears Packers game having this much juice. Even though it is Bears Week, and Bears Week every year is special. Bears Week every week is big, not just on the Packers side, but on the Bears side as well. But man, it's extra special when both teams matter.
So a couple things make this an enticing matchup. As we said, first place is at stake. Packers are 8-3-1. Bears are 9-3. Winner has first place in the NFC North entering Week 15. Something else I want to point out, John Kuhn, and I'm interested to see how this storyline plays out through the week. When Ben Johnson had his introductory press conference with the Bears back in March, whatever it was, or February, I don't remember. He was talking about the coaches in the division and the respect he has for the coaches in the division. I went back and watched the clip this week. He said Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell, two guys who are up for Coach of the Year, great coaches. And I've really enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice every year. Matt LaFleur was asked about that comment at the owners' meetings not long after and said he doesn't have a history with Ben Johnson. That's not Ben Johnson poking fun at a friend. I don't believe they've ever worked together. They don't know each other. Matt LaFleur kind of just brushed it off. And like I said earlier, Matt LaFleur is always going to say the right thing. He said, I'm sure Ben Johnson is just playing to the fans. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. John, I would not be surprised if the Packers win on Sunday, if Matt LaFleur walks to the podium and says, well, I guess Ben Johnson's not beaten me twice this year. He can be petty after the fact, but he's not going to give the Bears any extra bulletin board material before the fact, even though it would probably help the story that I'm writing this week.
Yeah, we don't do bulletin board material at 1265. That's kind of what we leave for other teams to do. And rarely will you get people to say something inside the locker room or from a coach that will provide bulletin board material. But I can imagine this is hanging up inside 1265, what Ben Johnson said. And I forgot all about this because this happened a long time ago. And you reminded me a few weeks ago of this. And I think it's important to note. And he was talking about the coaches last season inside the division. And he mentioned Kevin O'Connell. And he mentioned Dan Campbell. He didn't mention Matt LaFleur except to mention how good it was to beat him. That's a poke at the Green Bay Packers head coach. That's a poke at the fact that the Packers were 1-5 last year inside the division. And it was a poke at what other coaches around the league, ones that have had success against the Green Bay Packers feel. You can come into Green Bay and you can bully teams. That has been the mindset, and that has been kind of the stigma around this Packers team, probably for the majority of Matt LaFleur's tenure. When he gets into big games with big-time teams, with big-time defenses and strong physical offensive lines, that is how you beat the Green Bay Packers. But that's not the case this year. That's not the case of the last couple weeks for this Packers team. And Ben Johnson, when I watched that game on Black Friday between the Chicago Bears and Philadelphia Eagles, his team was physical. That Chicago Bears team was physical. I know he was brought in there to develop and whisper Caleb Williams into some sort of magical quarterback. But the thing that I'm noticing more with the Chicago Bear team is the physicality and the creativity with their offensive run game. And that is the thing that the Packers need to really watch out for, because that is something that he brought over directly from Detroit and is implemented already in year one with the Bears.
That's where this opponent preview starts and ends. Ben Johnson said today, actually, I was seeing our beat writer's tweet from his press conference. He said the Bears are winning in spite of their passing game. Head coach straight up said that. Bears have won 9 of 10, and they're winning in spite of their passing game recently. They have the number 2 rushing offense in the NFL. 153.8 rushing yards per game, ran all over the Philadelphia Eagles, who, mind you, have Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. The Packers are depleted in the middle of their defensive line. So that's a challenge. Packers haven't exactly defended the run well going back to that Week 8 game against the Steelers. I thought they were better against Jahmyr Gibbs, even though he got some explosives against them in the run game. But that's going to be a massive challenge. That offensive line is not your father's Bears offensive line. Like you said, This Chicago Bears team, John, is built on their offensive line and their run game. Their passing game is struggling right now. They do a good job protecting Caleb Williams, and he does a good job avoiding sacks, but their passing game just isn't gelling. They thrive on takeaways on the defensive side. They lead the league with 26 takeaways, 4 more than any other team, and bullying you in the run game. That is a formula to beat this Green Bay Packers team. We've seen it before against the Carolina Panthers, a takeaway, a strong run game. That could play to the Bears' favor on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that is the one thing that you really watch out for. And this is what makes their run game so dynamic. They've revamped that offensive line. It's much different than what it's been in years past. And it's the strong suit of their offense. And you take a good offensive line, and then you put the bells and the whistles around it that Ben Johnson can do, the creativity that we've seen in the past, like a Kyle Shanahan can do. And that's a run game that bodes very, very dangerous coming into Lambeau Field. Again, it all starts with the play. You could put all the bells and whistles you want around an offensive line that's average or below average, and it's not going to work. It really comes down to how physical are the 5 guys on that offensive line. And then you take a 2-yard hole and turn it into a 5-yard hole by putting the bells and whistles around it. That's what the offense for the Chicago Bears has been doing. And the Packers are going to have their hands full. I would imagine seeing a lot less shell this game that Hafley has shown us throughout the course of the season. He's played a lot of shell this year. I would anticipate seeing more guys up around the line of scrimmage, more Evan Williams at the line of scrimmage.
Great against the run.
That seems to be his shtick this year, and how Jeff Hafley is using him. So I can imagine that Caleb Williams is going to get a little bit of man opportunities out there to throw to those receivers that he has, and it'll be, can Caleb Williams adjust and do that, and can the Packers actually force them into that passing game?
And this is not a Packers fan. It's a podcast for Packers fans, but it's not a fan podcast. So we can give credit to the Chicago Bears here. They spent big on their offensive line this offseason. Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney. They already had Darnell Wright, who's their first-round pick from a couple years ago, and it's paid off. They can bully people up front, and the Packers' defensive line, Micah Parsons is going to get his. We know that. But like we talked about, Colby Wooden, Warren Brinson, Rashawn Gary, you're making $24 million a year. He's got to do something. Lucas Van Ness, if he plays, it's on all the other guys, not just to show up themselves, but to take some of that attention off Micah Parsons so the Bears just can't chip him, thump him, maybe put 3 guys on him on one snap and have to worry about anybody else who's not going to do much and just single up everybody else and not worry about them. So this Packers defensive line is in for a tough one. I think I know, before we get to score predictions, I had this in my notes. I'm going to ask Matt LaFleur today. By the time you're listening to this, you'll already know his answer or non-answer. I'm going to ask him about what Ben Johnson said and whether it has any relevance this week. I'll figure out a way to phrase the question. Matt LaFleur went on Pat McAfee's show during the draft, and he was talking about Ben Johnson and the Bears, and he very sarcastically, I remembered today, said, Ben Johnson's a great coach. He said that himself, kind of poking fun at how Ben Johnson kind of self-promoted himself. So make no bones about it. Matt LaFleur may not be the biggest fan of Ben Johnson. Now, maybe he was just poking fun, returning the favor after Ben Johnson did that. But I would not be surprised, John Kuhn, if, I don't want to say there's beef, but if it's not all hunky-dory between these two when they meet each other. I'm sure they have great respect for each other, but they've never worked together. They're not friends. I think there might be something to that storyline entering this game, or am I just being a journalist and trying to make too much of it?
Yes and yes. It's both, right? There is beef. There is beef. And there's beef specifically because, every coach that's ever hired in Chicago is told one thing. Hey, our goal was to beat the Green Bay Packers and to win the North. And that's why Ben Johnson said what he did. Every Bears head coach comes in and says something about beating the Green Bay Packers and taking control of the North. That is what Ben Johnson came in here and did. He walked on that podium and he pissed all over the microphone and he tried to say, this is going to be our division because we're going to beat Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers going forward. Now it's Matt's job to piss back and to go out there and to beat Ben Johnson.
Enough of this pissing. Do we have to use pissing as the metaphor here?
Yes. Yes, because we're a bunch of dogs in the NFL. We're a bunch of dogs in the NFL marking our territory. And that's what's going on. And Matt LaFleur needs to mark the territory of the North as the Packers again in 2025. So is he going to say anything? No, he's not going to say anything. But you guys all ran with last week when you asked about Jaden Reed, and he said, you'll have to wait until Thursday. Well, it turns out we didn't have to wait until Thursday. We had to wait until Wednesday, till the injury report came out before he was listed as out for this football game. I don't care what Matt LaFleur says today when you ask him those questions. This is going to be a nasty game. These guys want to beat each other in the worst way, not just because of what the records are, because it's Bears-Packers.
I'm just glad, as a neutral observer, that there's some juice in this rivalry. I remember Keyshawn Nixon, I'm paraphrasing here, I think a couple of years ago, he said, we don't really view it as a rivalry. And I get this new age of Packers maybe doesn't have the historical appreciation for the rivalry. But for the guys that have been here a while, the Jordan Loves, the Keyshawn Nixons, the Christian Watsons, it's still Packers Bears. Like you said, it means a lot to the fans, maybe not as much to the players, but it's a rivalry again. Keyshawn Nixon, and he's right, basically said, if we win all these games, it's not really a rivalry. The Packers are 11-1 against the Bears under Matt LaFleur, and the one loss came in January when Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs weren't healthy, and the Packers had already secured their exact seed for the playoffs. There was nothing to play for them. So credit to the Bears, but it's been completely one-sided. There's finally some juice around this thing.
Yeah, that's a journalist thing, right? The Bears don't like that. And if you think that the juice will be out there, the juice will be out there on game day. They're going to come in here with C.J. Gardner-Johnson and all the trash talking that you've ever seen in your life, and they're going to try and intimidate this Packers team. And the Packers team is going to do it right back with, with Carrington Valentine and J.J. and Egbari. They're going to go out there and trash talk too. And just the fact that the records are the way they are will force this thing back into what it is, and that's the greatest rivalry in the NFL.
The oldest rivalry in the NFL too. And we're going to make our score predictions for that rivalry. I have mine, and I'm going to give you some specifics here. Packers 30, Bears 27 in overtime.
Wow.
I'm getting specific with an overtime prediction, John, for the first time this year. 30-27 Packers. Why? I think Jordan Love's rolling. I think they can protect him well enough. I think they get the run game going a little bit. Jordan Love has been so good this year at protecting the football. There may be this misnomer that he's reckless with the football, and Dan Orlovsky's done a great job illustrating this as well on the various shows he's on. There might be this notion that Jordan Love's reckless with the football because of the style of throw he makes, or maybe some risks he takes. Look at his numbers. He takes care of the football exceptionally. He's going to do that again on Sunday, in my mind. Bears won't be able to feast off the takeaways, and this offense is going to win the Packers another game, 30-27, even if the Bears have success running the ball, which I think they will.
Yeah, I think the Bears will have some success running the football. I don't know if it will look quite like it did against Philadelphia. I would expect Jeff Hafley to have a nice game plan for that. It's going to be cold. It's going to be outdoors, and I think they're going to force the ball into the hands of Caleb Williams, and it's going to be, can you keep up with this Packers offense if it doesn't turn the football over? I don't think the Packers will turn the football over. I don't think they'll do it at least multiple times in this game, which the Bears have almost exclusively in their wins, is multiple turnovers. So because of that, I'm going to pick the Packers also, but I'm going to pick it a little bit lower scoring. I'm going to go 27 because that's their favorite number, and 20. They cover.
27-20 covers the 6.5 at Potawatomi Sportsbook. This is going to be a good one. I'm excited for this one. And it's a home game, so I don't have to get on a regional jet anymore, which I'm thankful for. All right. Before we get out of here, a reminder, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Tundra GB, at The Tundra GB on Instagram and X, where we put out all our clips throughout the week from our phenomenal producer, Adam Gracia. Had to throw that one in there. We'll see how he likes that. And then just follow us, like, subscribe on all your podcast feeds, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your shows. We're all over the place. Every Tuesday morning. So for John Kuhn, I'm Matt Schneidman. We appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you next week.